governorship candidate of the National Rescue Movement, the NRM, in Lagos State, joins us on the program. As you've seen, Mr. Akinwumi Braithwaite is here in our Lagos studio. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
The buzz for a new Lagos. That's the tagline,
yeah.
I imagine. But, you know, for a lot of people, the buzz now is this Naira redesign, the new Naira notes or otherwise. I mean, the question you were asking earlier on, if anybody has cash, and, you know, some will say it's almost diabolical to have cash in you because it's really hard to get. And so let's start off on that as some sort of maybe a mock examination for you. We've seen different governors across states coming out with one policy or the other, pronouncements as to how to perhaps ameliorate the situation for residents in their states. And I wonder for you, if you were governor of Lagos State, maybe not today, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when this policy really hit the road, what would you have done? What policies would you have taken or followed through with?
I understand the governor of Oyo State actually allowed free mass transportation. Certainly that would be a policy that I think would be worthy, you know, of emulating. Since you're looking at who does this affect the most, you would now need to look at that aspect of your society in that segment and say, okay, what if we let people ride free on the buses? I think that's something that could be a very, very immediate amelioration of, you know, getting people moving around. And certainly for the public transportation system, that is something that could be done, you know, very, very quickly. Transportation costs represent a very, very major cost in everybody's daily activities. That, I think, would be the central. Anything else in terms of perhaps maybe you have some food reservoirs, you know, that you have in these many warehouses, you know, that you might have for contingency issues. We'll probably sort of let a certain volume of that out into the market and let people also have, you know, some help, maybe some food kitchen type arrangements. Yeah.
This situation now presents a very interesting dynamic to it. The Supreme Court has a ruling, an order on this, and the president has his position. And as I said, you've seen governors, Kaduna State governor, for example, saying, well, right here in my state, this is how things would go. And you've seen other governors saying, well, if you're a business and you do this, this is what happens to you. So this is a very interesting situation. You, let's imagine for a moment, are governor. Would you be, you know, towing the path of what we've seen the other governors do in terms of those pronouncements? Would you maintain status quo, as they've said? Or what exactly would you have done if you were governor?
Yeah, again, on the advice of my Attorney General, I believe that certainly once the Supreme Court has spoken, that becomes the law. The Supreme Court has interpreted the situation and has said status quo. So in effect, status quo, as I would interpret it, is that all currencies remain valid. And to that extent, you know, within the state, I mean, we are running a federal system. So within the state, that would be, in effect, legal tender.
Understanding the facts that, and it's very interesting, really, just hearing sides to this, such that a lot of people understand perhaps how governance works, knowing that you do not issue that legal tender. You're not in any, you know, you don't have any authority over that. That's at the president's level. And he has given the pronouncement that, well, off of that, I think that the 200 should be legal. So you're saying you would go against the president's directive and tow the path of the Supreme Court.
Correct.
How would that happen? How would that be, in your opinion, and from your where you sit? How would that bias, if I can use the term, of yours for the Supreme Court's ruling over that of that pronouncement of the president, how would it be activated or effected?
Well, again, in a federal system, the president doesn't have that sort of dictatorial right over the governor of the state. The governor of the state is the executive, no doubt. However, the president is running the monetary, you know, system and the monetary policy. So as the executive, there's no way you're going to go force open the doors of the bank and then withdraw the monies and say, or stand in front of the bank and say, hey, with a gun pointed at their head and say, you've got to take this money in. But as far as maintaining that sort of legal stance to say, if anybody is not accepting, the legal tender, then surely they are going against the law, as it were. And if anybody goes against the law, then they would have to face that level of prosecution. Now, exactly how that would work in practice would then be down to my Attorney General to effect whether there's going to be prosecutions or whatever.
It's good that you mentioned the fact that you recognize that it's the executive arm of the federal government that executes the monetary policy, which powers is devolved to the CBN to certify what is legal tender and what is not. It's not up to the Supreme Court to issue legal tenders. All the Supreme Court or any court that can do is to make the pronouncement, and it's the job of the executive to execute it. But at this point, the federal executive arm of government has taken a position which is in deference to that of the Supreme Court. And I think that's the point that Kari is making.
Yes, I think this is a major conundrum. The question is the Supreme Court above the executive? Or is the executive above the Supreme Court? Or do these arms of government have co-equal, standing? I think this is a situation where we're all going to have to find out. We've not been here before, but certainly we are running a federal system. It's not a unitary system. Now, in the unitary system, you give the command and everything drills down. In the federal system, each state, also has some level of action. Right. Now, this is an exclusive matter. It's on the exclusive list, no doubt. But the question remains, if it's now a question of what is now legal tender today. That's the question I think that we're all dealing with. Is the 500 Naira and the 1,000 Naira still legal tender? It would appear to me that the Supreme Court is saying, yes, maintain the status quo, which is that 500 and 1,000 remains legal tender. It also appears that the president is saying, no, I disagree with you, CBN. I have taken the decision that this is no longer legal tender. And you're absolutely right. That's within the president's purview. Now, the question is, what is within the Supreme Court's purview? Now, I'm not a lawyer, but as I see it, if the Supreme Court felt that it had no jurisdiction, then is it going on an exercise of futility and just wasting all our time? Or does the Supreme Court actually have jurisdiction? Now, what I don't know yet is whether the president reports into the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court reports into the president. Now, if they have their own sort of areas of jurisdiction, and we're told that these are three arms of governance, I would certainly love to see how this ends.
Well, a lot of Nigerians would like to think that the Nigerian people should be above whoever is deciding what the interests of the Nigerian people.
After all, it is we the people.
We the people, right? Should be principal in all of this. So let's talk about your manifesto, your plan for Lagos. I mean, we're not counting down to your elections, at least this Saturday. Yours is still in March, but it's closer than a lot of people would think. And your tagline has also been restructuring Lagos for the benefit of all. Am I correct?
Redesign, rebuild, restructure Lagos.
Restructure Lagos. I mean, I caught that on your website, and they've always said restructuring means different things for a lot of people at the national level. But it's interesting you bring that to a state like Lagos, the commercial capital of Nigeria. I mean, all of this talk about the Naira swap will perhaps be felt more in Lagos because there's a lot of money that changes hands. So when you say restructure Lagos for the benefit of all, what does that restructure mean to you and perhaps the average Lagosian, as we call it?
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me is that Lagos State and the House of Assembly have repeatedly turned down this idea of autonomy for the local government. I find that sad because certainly that's definitely one area that needs to be restructured. And it is that way because if we truly want to lift people out of poverty, the only way you're going to really effectively do it is the way all countries that have made progress do it, and that is by going to the local levels. You go down to that local level and you ensure that you are really bringing up cottage industries, and these kind of activities start at that level. That's the way that China brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. You know, there is no magic way of doing it other than you really get down to the brass tacks and you get people to really start getting into activity. So what restructuring means is that you look at each local government and you look at that local government and say, look, we have got to look at you in terms of GDP. So if you imagine that you take GDP at local government level and you start to really energize it, that rolls up, the aggregate of that becomes the overarching state GDP. So essentially, if you don't restructure, you will just leave these as comatose as they are today. And who are we hurting? Ourselves. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if the local government now feels that it doesn't have any ownership, it doesn't have any, it's not taking its due position and responsibility, things are going to be the way they are. And you see, the Lagos as it is today is chaotic because the local government guys have taken their hands off. They're not allowed to do anything per se. They've got to go report to the father, you know, in Alausa.
Is that a function of state laws or the federal laws? We saw what happened at the National Assembly recently, the push for, the Constitution Amendment, and local government autonomy was a big one. And we saw how states voted on that one, and it was a sour point for a lot of us. I thought we had all agreed that we expected a local government. So how much responsibility would you place at the table of the state and at the federal level, which of course we know we have to make that decision collectively, at least with 2/3 vote?
Coming in, how much responsibility would I place on the federal?
Yes, and the state, yes. For local government autonomy, that is.
Well, the Constitution already has given the roles of the third tier of government, so it exists constitutionally. A number of states have agreed that a number of state assemblies have voted in favor of that. Autonomy is just really a financial autonomy to say, look, listen, you can get this money and do with it as you're required to do. Some states have held on to the money that's coming through, even though the president, as at last year, was saying, okay, look, let's give it direct. We allocate the money directly to the local government.
And it took that to court.
Absolutely. So I think that, in many respects, yes, the federal has no right, per se, to try to alter the equation. That's left to the states, to really determine, yes, do we want this to really happen, or do we want to keep it the way it is? I think it's a bit hypocritical of states now to be shouting that you want this restructuring and all of that, and yet you're strangulating your local government. So let the local governments breathe, for goodness sake. So I believe that the states need to man up to this, allow the local government autonomy, and let the local government do what it is constitutionally required to do in terms of basic education, adult education, vocational training, fixing of roads. All the things that matter to you and I are within the purview of local government.
Do you think that fact, okay, let me speak about the political education or maturity at the local levels. Do you think it is sufficient for that kind of responsibility? Because that's one of the arguments a number of states are bringing up, that look, the politics at the local level is probably not strong enough to be able to stand on its own, so they need the supervision, so to speak, of the states, which is the reason the Constitution says there should be a state joint local government account.
Okay, so to get a president of a country, he must come from a ward. That ward is within a local government. You and I come from local government, okay? I think we're pretty intellectual. And that means, therefore, that the people that live in local governments are different type of people. All strata of society are within local government. It's just that people have not been interested in local government. We've not been made to see the importance, as it were. We've all focused on presidency and state. But where it affects us the most, your primary health is a local government issue. So to that extent, what people like me are saying today is that, look, let's wake up, right? Let's understand something, that it starts, as the maxim goes, all politics is local. And it's really true, because the street that runs right in front of your house is what matters to your car. The fact that your car is going to be able to run smoothly and whatever is a function of what roads are you driving on, every day. So to a large extent, we need to now get people more aware that, hey, guess what? Your solutions that you really need, that are very, very close to you, are the responsibility of your local government. Therefore, those people who should be running the local government should be people who are educated enough, who understand the issues of society, and who are there to do what they need to do. After all, if you look at America, where we borrow our system from, you have the mayor, you have all these guys who are really down there at the local level, and they're really held to account by the people.
A colleague has asked you a number of questions about your 3 Rs, as one might want to put it. What would be, if you can say, the 3 top concerns you have, that if you had the chance, or your plans for Lagos State, that if you had the chance, these are the 3 top sectors or issues that you would want to give priority attention as governor of the state?
The very first one would be employment. I'm a full employment type person. I believe that if you don't fix employment, a number of issues are linked to unemployment. Crime. There is a correlation between high unemployment and crime rates.
Does that mean you will increase the civil service employment?
Civil service?
I mean, when you say that's the
I believe we have about nearly 60,000 civil servants in Lagos. I'm someone who also comes from the ICT background.
Okay.
We're talking AI today and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot that computers can do. So in that regard, we won't need to increase. We need to do more computerization in the civil service. But I would bring a lot of employment into areas that require lots of labor. And interestingly, the way the world is going now too, almost every area of endeavor can actually have robots and things like that. But that would cause a social problem for us. So we don't want to go down that route. But so you take the traditional areas that are labor intensive, such as agriculture, throughout the whole value chain. I happen to own a farm, so I understand, the whole thing from the seed generation to all of that across, okay? That's a very, very labor-intensive industry. We would definitely put a lot of jobs there. You have the tourism, hospitality. That's very, very labor-intensive. Anywhere you go across the world, you see that there's a lot of people that are employed, in the tourism industry. Waste. Lagos is a waste nightmare. But it also provides an opportunity for labor, for jobs.
Right.
So you can put a lot of people there into those whole recycling and whatever that we can do there. Sports is another area that's begging for it to be turned into career. Every type of sporting endeavor that you can imagine can be turned into a profession. In England, there are people who are millionaires just by playing snooker.
Right.
So we would look at all of these areas and really deploy and make sure full employment is definitely one area. The second area is enterprise. I mentioned earlier this cottage industry. That's what China does. That's what Germany does. To this day, Germany is very, very big on its MSMEs, to the extent that it provides grants for them buying the equipment and all that they're going to use in specific sectors. They target specific sectors and they raise and it's like it's too small to fail. The third area of real importance would be social services. I would be very, very big on social security because due to no fault of their own, people can't find employment. They can't eat, livelihood. And you know, we vilify the masses. We talk about they're looking for stomach infrastructure. But that's a bit rich when you consider the fact that America, the most capitalist nation of all, has a safety net for the disadvantaged members of its society. So you can't have a society that doesn't have a safety net,
right, and
expect that there's going to be stability, you're going to be able to grow your economy and all that. So that would be the third one.
I want us to wind down on this. It's a very interesting conversation. I mean, in the last election, your party at the national level polled 6,229, the presidential candidate. Lagos, I mean, that's in the nation of what was over 80 million registered voters at that time. 84 million. Now, Lagos has, 9 million registered voters. We don't know about the PVC collection, so we're hoping that at least we can clock in at least over 50% of that. What are you targeting in terms of, votes? What are you targeting such that, I know that they always say that your party, small parties. The question is, are you small in terms of the financial capacity, in terms of membership? Maybe that's a conversation for another day. But let's end on that. What is your target, really, as we enter?
I think, look, I would be looking at about 1.5 million, votes as being the number that can get us over the line. And I say that in looking at 2019 numbers, that the current governor polled 739,000, votes, barely 12% of the registered voters, okay? So there are a massive number of people that are undecided who didn't go out to vote last year because they kept saying, who am I going to vote for? I don't see the candidate I'm voting for, or even the issues, are not really the issues that I can see moving forward. So I'm appealing to that large number of the undecided, of people who are looking for somebody who really has what it takes with a proven track record. People are saying, okay, can you do it? And I'm saying, okay, you know what? That's a very good question, an important question, because you have to ask yourself,
right,
the person that's going to take this Lagos, which is a very, very diverse, very complex society, it's all of Nigeria put into one place, has to be someone that in his past, you can see that he's handled diversity, he has human capital ability, and somebody who really has financial stewardship, who can take that financial aspect of Lagos and really deal with it as it.
So your target is undecided voters.
Undecided voters.
So it's been a very interesting conversation. I mean, your background cuts across communications, customer service, and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see the build up to this election. But we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Akiomi Braithwaite, the Lagos governorship candidate of the NRM. Thank you for
having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, so that's a snapshot of what to expect here in Lagos, but the conversation continues. We're counting down to Saturday. Don't go away. We'll be back.